Welcome to Wednesday Live with Evie. This is number 75. And today we are talking about deciding how to market your business. And if you don't know me, my name is Evie Burke, and I work with women entrepreneurs and I help them take their productivity to a new level. So at the end of the day, they don't have to be worrying about what didn't I get done today or what do I need to be doing tomorrow. Instead, they know they have a plan, they know they're prepared, and they can spend their day spend their evening or their off hours being fully present with the people that they spend their off hours with. So I see Mary's watching. Hi, Mary. So this topic came about because I was talking with somebody the other day, and in passing, she mentioned that she was watching a bunch of videos, had been to a bunch of seminars, um, listened to a bunch of talks, and it was all so she could learn how to have a more successful business. Generally, the topic was around marketing and selling. And she shared that her head was spinning and she just wasn't sure what to focus on or what to do because there were so many things that she could be doing. What should she focus on? And I was kind of thinking about this later. We didn't really have an opportunity to really dive into it. And I was thinking about it later and I realized that my normal advice for what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed is to do a brain dump and get everything out of your head and onto a piece of paper and then assign it priorities. Um, so that you know what really needs to be worked on first. It's the whole premise of my freebie, how to choose priorities when everything is important. But the problem is when you don't really have a direction, it doesn't work so well. Like it works really well when there's a lot of things that need to be done and you know what needs to be done and you have a direction and a focus for your business. But when you're in that mode where you're learning so many new things and maybe getting a bunch of conflicting advice or conflicting thoughts, then sometimes it's really hard to figure out, well, what do I need to be doing first? Like, do I need to take the strategy of this marketing person or do I need to take the strategy of this other marketing person? So what you need to do when you find yourself in this situation is back up and ask yourself two very, very important questions. And the first question is, and like I said, these are basic questions. So the first question is, who is your ideal client? And you just need to be very, very clear about who your ideal client is. And don't worry, I'm going to share the questions and then I'll go into why these are important. So who's your ideal client? Like who do you want to work with? Who buys what you sell or who do you anticipate will buy what you sell? The second question is how do you help them? So what problem do they have that you solve? Why do they buy your product or service? What is it that you are doing that helps the people that you are selling to? So who's your ideal client? How do you help them? And then there's a bonus question here because a lot of times when we're looking at all of the things that we could be doing to market or promote our business, one of the other things that we really need to think about here is where do they hang out? Where do you find them? So this is both physically, like where can you physically go and find these people? And then that also is online. So are they online? If they are online, where are you going to tend to find them interacting online? Is it a Facebook? Is it a LinkedIn? Is it an Instagram? All of those types of things. So these questions, and they're here. These questions are important because they can really help you determine what projects or what tasks around marketing and promoting your business that you want to focus on. So it can help from everything from, it can help for everything from deciding, do you need one of those big fancy websites? And you can ask yourself, is my ideal client the type of person that is really going to care if I have like this big, in-depth, fancy website? Or if I just have a Facebook page that's engaged, is that going to be enough for them? Or if I have one page, up somewhere where it just lists the basic information. Will that be enough? Maybe is it important that they just get to know you, where having a website just isn't important really to them, because it's more important for them to figure out if you personally are someone that they want to work with, right? So if you sell a product, are they interested in a catalog, or would they prefer to see examples of your work, or would they like to try the product? How do your clients interact with the product or the service you sell? How do they want to be introduced to it? And, again, going back to, would your clients need to meet you in person, especially if you have a service? Think about, how would an ideal client prefer to meet someone that helps them with the things you help them with? Is it where they're going to really want to get to know you and feel comfortable with you? Are they going to want to see how you interact with other people? Like, what is it that is going to make them feel, or help them feel comfortable purchasing from you, or at least taking that first initial step, whether it's your freebie or a low cost class or whatever it is for you? So going back to the 3 questions, it's really important to know your ideal client, because when you know that, you can start filtering some of those decisions through, is this something that will really speak to my ideal client? So if you're watching a class, or you're in a course and they're talking about all about Instagram, who's your ideal client? And then looking at the bonus question, where do they hang out? Are those people on Instagram? If you are thinking about, how to sell your product or service, what is it that your ideal client is looking for? Like, how are they going to want to pay you? How are they going to want to look through your products or your services? These questions are the lens that you can look at those decisions through, and it can really help give you some clarity around them. So another 2 other questions to ask yourself, and I don't have these for the screen, not questions, but 2 things to consider are: be consistent and move on if something isn't working for you. And now those 2 things sound like they are contradictory, but in being consistent, sometimes you need to play a little bit with what you're consistent on. And so the things that I started with for being consistent, and these aren't necessarily the things that you need to be doing, I'm just giving you some examples. I'm very consistent with my newsletter and my Facebook Lives. The newsletter I've been sending out since 2011, 2012, and it's been pretty consistent. There was a period of time about 2-3 years ago where I didn't send the newsletter out for probably 9 months. And because it's funny, because when you're really consistent, you pull that consistency forward, where people just assume, because I would run into people like 6 months later who would tell me, Evie, I love your newsletter. Like, I save them so I can read them later. And I was like, oh, okay. Knowing that I hadn't sent it out for 6 months. But they were so conditioned to the fact that I sent it out every week that they hadn't really noticed. And maybe that speaks to the fact that they weren't really paying attention to their email anyway, which is okay. But they just knew my newsletter went out every week. It had for years, so they just assumed that it was continuing to go out. And the lives, unless there's vacation or a holiday or something going on, I'm generally here for my lives. The other things that I do pretty consistently are I network about 4 times a month minimally, and I show up some of the same places every single month. Like, I'm going to be there, unless, again, vacation or holiday or whatever. The other thing that I'm very consistent about is the first sentence of how I introduce myself. So you even see this here in the lives, where I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Evie Burke, and I work with women entrepreneurs, and I help them take their productivity to a new level. Maybe 1 or 2 words right there after the introduction, after the Evie Burke part will change, but generally that stays exactly the same everywhere. right? Whether it's online, whether it's in person, whether it's a Facebook Live, like those are things that stay the same for me. And another thing that I'm pretty consistent with is what I'm promoting. Generally, it's one of two things. It's the Facebook group Productivity for Women Entrepreneurs, or it's the Unnamed Productivity Club when that opens. So those things, though, aren't things that I've always been consistent with. And one of the things that I learned was just because something didn't work the first time through, or the first 2 weeks of trying it, or even the first month or two after trying it, I really needed to keep doing it to really give it a chance to work before I, threw my hands up in the air and said it didn't work. So some of you might remember that one of the thing, the way, one of, let me back up. Networking is like this, where sometimes people will say, oh, I went to one networking event and I didn't get any business from it, so in-person networking just doesn't work for me. That's something you need to be consistent with, right? That's something, especially depending on what your service or your product is, where you need to build that relationship. So if you're somebody that's selling one-off things for under $20, yeah, maybe you can walk into a new room and you can sell $100 worth of product, right? Because that's maybe 5 to 6 or 8, whatever, products, right? But if you're selling a service where it's over $100, or even $1,000 or more dollars to work with you, then you're generally not going to walk into a networking situation and walk away with, multiple thousands of dollars in sales, if any sales at all. However, when you keep showing up there and you're consistent and the way that you present yourself is consistent, then you're more likely to have people start to take an interest and notice and be curious about what you do. And that's when things will start to shift. So things that I'm still kind of playing with, for me and my consistency in my business is the types of things that I post or when I post to my Facebook page. I tend to change up what comes after that first sentence of my introduction. And I might continue to do that, playing with that, the rest of that forever. It might always change, or maybe I'll find something that I really like and I'll stick with it. Who knows? And I'm playing with other ways I promote myself in general. And again, as I find something that works really well, then I'll continue doing it. So another thing to think about here is something that you're doing. If it's not working, that doesn't mean you stop doing it. Maybe it means you need to tweak it or try to do it in a little different way. There's one way that I've been playing with promoting myself that I noticed I wasn't really getting the results that I wanted, but instead of just like throwing my hands up in the air and say, oh, I just won't do that anymore, I thought about, well, what are some other ways I could approach this? What are some other ways that I could, some other things I could do in that situation that maybe would help me get more of the results that I wanted? So, look at those things. What are the things that you're doing that maybe they're not working, but is there a tweak you can make? So the topic today is deciding how to market your business. So if we go back, I'm just going to wrap things up here. If we go back, there we go. The 3 questions are: know who your ideal client is, know how you help them or how you serve them, and where do they hang out. And once you know those things, you can use those as your filter for everything else that you're doing, and it'll help you decide whether going to that class or doing that program is right for you versus something else, okay? And or implementing the things that you're using, the things that you're doing. And then the other 2 pieces of advice are: be consistent and move on if something isn't working for you after you give it enough time. So I mentioned my Facebook group, Productivity for Women Entrepreneurs. Maybe I didn't, but it's a great group to be in if you're someone that just wants a little more support around these situations, around productivity, or maybe you have a question that you don't want to be out there for the whole world to see and you want it to be in a smaller group where you will feel supported and maybe not be put on blast, then come and check out the group, Productivity for Women Entrepreneurs. I'll include the link below when I come back through. I don't have it saved on in my notes today, but I'll put that link in there when I come back through here in just a bit. But I would love to know from you guys, what are your tried and true methods for deciding how to market your business? Like, do you have a different set of criteria that you use? Do you have like a rule of thumb that really seems to work for you? Or are the things, thank you, Mary. I see Mary just posted the group for the link for the group in there. So yeah, anyway, going back to sharing, commenting in the comments here, is what works for you? Do you do something similar? Do you ask similar questions? Do you ask different questions? You know, what is your kind of go-to method for deciding on how you're going to market your business? One of the things that I didn't say that I think also is really important is doing that gut check, like checking with your intuition and trusting that and deciding, is this something that I want to move forward with? Because sometimes that can encourage us to go places that our brain would say, oh no, let's not do that. But our gut says, yeah, let's go try that. Let's see how that works. So always do the gut check too. All right. That is all for this week's Wednesday Live. I will not be here next week because next week I am taking a staycation. I might do an impromptu live next week talking about what prompted the staycation, because as I've been sharing with people that I'm doing a staycation and why I'm doing it, it occurs to me that it might be helpful for you guys to know why I'm doing the staycation. So maybe I'll do it later this week, or maybe I'll do it early next week. But either way, watch for that at some random undisclosed time later. So until August, much love. Bye.